So that's just what he did. Everyday objects, especially things that are flat like numbers and flags, became the subjects of his painting. Up on the IKEA board for 2nd grade, it says, I can create a work of art using numbers, and I can become aware of the art of Jasper Johns. So we did the first one. Now we're going to try the second one.
I did my 7.
A huge.
But she says that she using the 10.
And
return. I did the best. That one right there.
I'm going to move you over to reading number 2. My favorite part, I think, is probably
Not all the colors.
The piece about the student-centered learning is the thing that got me really excited when I started thinking about it was it's no longer my responsibility. Once the kids know what's going on in here and what the point of their being here is, mostly through the ICANN board, then they become responsible as much as I am for their learning in this space. My main goal was to throw as much stuff at them as I possibly could during their time with me. And I've noticed that my lessons have gotten longer and more drawn out because it's not just about working with the tools, it's about the kids thinking about what they're learning when they're working with the tools.
Well, student-centered is always looking for what the students are interested in first and trying to teach with that. I just listen to students. My goal was to find out what might motivate and what might engage them. Instead of using the lessons that I know work already, I took a couple of periods to brainstorm with the students. And they came up with these concepts, well, let's do selfies. Brainstormed harder, we thought harder. So the selfies became like, okay, we'll do the shoulders and the head shot. And then we'll have like the angel on one side, full body, and the little naughty person, devil, on the other side, full body. But they had to express more about what represented themselves. My independent study portfolio class, each student determines and outlines their learning objective and their learning outcome, and then they have to connect and link it to the main learning results and the standard. So every student in this class is doing a different lesson. They're studying and researching a different topic about the visual arts.
Well, I mean, standards-based learning is where we are, and that's and art, music are no different. I mean, and that focus is there.
Literacy is the big thing, and it doesn't matter what you teach, it has to be a piece of what you're doing in your classroom. So I've always tried to connect it to the art room somehow. With the older kids, it is in the form of writing. With the little kids, it's usually in the form of stories. But the kindergartners are going to read Mouse Paint with me today, and it's perfect because these little mice, they mix primary colors into secondary colors, and it's fun because the kids will sit there and guess what colors they're going to make.
We're going to use the colors red, yellow, and blue to make other colors. Primary colors?
Primary colors.
Awesome. Once there were 3 white mice on a white piece of paper. So 3 jars of paint. One was
Red, yellow, blue,
Cheyenne.
orange.
Let's see what color we would.
When we think about student thinking in the art room, I always comes back to visual thinking strategies because that's a big piece of visual literacy. And so I did get Philip Yenewine's new visual thinking strategies book, which does connect visual thinking strategies with the Common Core literacy. And the first chapter, he just had me at the first chapter because the first chapter was called Permission to Wonder. And it's all about, one of my favorite things about the little kids is they will just ask a billion questions. It doesn't even matter if you throw the answer at them. They just, you know, they're just curious about everything. And I think that's one of the things in here that I love to do is I love giving them stuff just to think about and come up with their own answers, not give them answers.
What are we calling this group of colors?
Primary colors.
Primary colors. High five. You're going to get your little mouse feet. And you're going to run those little mouse feet all over your paper. We don't want to get paint all over it. Let's see, did anyone make orange? Very interesting theme there too. We'll around. I'm going to go around his little foot. I'm going to turn.
Because I've always tried to design this classroom so that everybody's successful in here anyway, and I think one of my favorite things about art is, I mean, they can come in here and it's not like some of the other curriculum. There's not a right answer. And there's not even just one answer. Everybody can come up with something completely different.
And when I think that nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. When students realize that you do care about them as people, you're going to push them. You're going to try to get, squeeze as much out of them as you can. But if they know you care about them, and they know it's genuine, and if you have some passion about what you're teaching, just give it time, and the magic will happen.
There are a few different ways I assess students. I do use their final piece of artwork as kind of like a checklist of, well, did they use red and blue to make purple? So that would be a really simple assessment. But the other thing I'm doing, and I'm getting a lot of really rich information from, is I'm looking for some of the studio habits. I'm looking to see if they're connecting their learning to learning outside the art room, to other content areas. And a lot of students are doing that, but I wasn't noticing it. I also use art notes, which I'll be using with my first grade later, and they go on the back of the artwork when the artwork gets sent home, because it's a pretty quick assessment, a self-assessment for the kids, where the goals of the lesson are on the art note, they check them off, we stick it to the back of the work, and it serves as kind of talking points too. When they bring the artwork home, they can share their learning with their parents.
You can see that we've met all the goals that we learned about on the I Can board while we were making this artwork. I can recognize the artwork of Pete Mondrian.
Yes.
Look around the room. Do you see a piece of artwork by Pete Mondrian anywhere? Point to it. Point to it so I know you see it. Awesome. So you met that first goal. Any color crayon. Check off that box. Third box. Says I can identify and use the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, in a work of art. When you take these pieces of artwork home, share what you learned about them with your family.
The checklist is big when I'm doing our trimester grades. There's lots of standard assessment, observation, questioning stuff.
Okay, give me a thumbs up if you know what we need to do today. I see we are all ready.
Artistic processes checklist, which basically takes the studio habits of mine and it kind of condenses them into like 5 different areas, because it's more reasonable for me to try and observe with my kids. And so I'm not looking at just their artwork. That's not the tool, that's not the piece I'm using to assess them completely anymore. What I'm doing is I'm looking at their approach to the materials, how they're thinking about what they're doing, how they reflect on what they're doing and connect it to their classroom, or even what the stuff they do at home. With the older kids, yeah, I have self-assessments that they do on their own, and we've talked about the different categories, and they reflect using those categories while looking at their own work. So they tell me, well, this part was difficult, but I kept working on it, or this piece was something that I never tried before and it was successful, or maybe it wasn't successful but they made it work anyway. A self-assessment, and those have changed since the Maine Arts Assessment Initiative too, because the self-assessments have gone from questions about the artwork, and they've been developed into questions about the student's artwork connected to the studio habits of mind. So that's a new piece of language that the kids are gaining also. I have my artistic processes checklist, and I photocopy it onto the back of my seating chart. So when the class comes in, I flip it over, and it's for the whole trimester, and it has spots where I can check off and put the different number for meets, exceeds. I have a spot where I write down really cool stuff, like when one of my second graders, we were painting still lifes. She did not end up with a still life, but oh my gosh, did she have fun mixing her colors together.
No, Jordan, I don't think we talked today. Would you like to tell Mrs. Friend what we did today?
They use the primary colors mixed in.
Oh. You mix red with the yellow.
Orange.
Oh, that happened? Start something new, but it's going to build on the stuff we've already done. We've been working on patterns. Raise your hand if you remember the special name for that pattern that we used.
Plaid.
Yeah, we
I'm
did
wearing plaid.
You are wearing plaid. MC Escher was an artist who used patterns to make woodcuts, and sometimes he repeated animal shapes in his artwork. And all of this is his stuff too up here. Is you're going to use these little heart-shaped stencils, and you're going to trace
A heart.
So what do you think I'm going to fill these spaces with, Jalen?
Pattern.
I am.
I get 2 spots on the report card. So it's art concepts and it's participation in here. So it's 4 for exceeds, 3 for meets, 2 for partially meets, area of concern. Now, I love trimesters because they get the information faster. It still gives me enough time to get to know kids I haven't met before and see what they're capable of in here. And it gives me another chance to report out about what the kids are learning in here, which is great.
And in this electronic system, you can identify the standards that you are including in your unit, the critical skills, the assessments that you're going to use, and your resources. Those are just some of the components. When you have that collective data in one repository, then and everybody has access to it, then every teacher can see what's happening in art, for instance, at the elementary level. You can look at those kinds of units and you can think about what you're doing in your own classroom, and can I tie something into what Lisa is doing in art right now? What work of literature is she using to kickstart this unit that she's doing in art? To really focus on how they're teaching the standards, what the critical skills are that they're expecting of their children, and how art units can tie in with everything across the curriculum.
Nothing was more powerful to me and should be more powerful to the visual arts than one particular standard, and that's C1. C1 states that students need to analyze and apply creative problem solving and creative thinking skills in their own work and the work of others. I've developed creative thinking techniques for every single class that I teach. A combination of quick writes, quick draws, journaling. But creative thinking leads us into the 21st century skills. I was empowered by what happened to Bloom's taxonomy. Creating would be higher than evaluating. With that knowledge, I went into the classroom and said, well, I'm going to put a lot of energy into creative thinking skills, not just embedded in the lesson, but overtly applied to the beginning of each class, so that we practice and we exercise our creative thinking skills every day in every single class. The solutions for tomorrow come from making new connections. And if you teach creative thinking skills in the classroom, the other contents areas, they're going to be thinking, well, how can I connect that? It can be assessed, but I would recommend that we do it gently and slowly. Kind of approach it with different levels of questions that are open-ended. The first year is to invite them back into their imagination. And the second year, use a number of different creative thinking techniques that are slightly higher level. And by the time they're in my independent study portfolio class, they're dealing with questions about innovation and design. So there are levels within the grade levels, but even within the class, you get different levels of creative thinking. The point is to gently and slowly make them a deeper thinker.
A couple of really exciting things that have happened recently is I've been invited to speak with the school board about the Maine Arts Assessment Initiative, and I'm looking forward to that. And the other piece is my principal has asked me to share the stuff I've been doing with the Maine Arts Assessment Initiative at a staff meeting with the other teachers in the building. And I'm excited about that because when other classroom teachers have come into the meetings with strategies they're using in their classrooms, it has given me the opportunity to use that language with my kids in here. So I'm hoping that happens the other way also. The biggest aha I had from the Maine Arts Assessment Initiative, we looked at all these different pieces of artwork and we had to decide whether they showed proficiency. And one of the things that struck me the most was that every teacher in that room wanted to know more. They wanted to know more about, okay, what was the lesson? What was the student trying to do? What was the larger body of work by that student? And it became very clear to me that a piece of artwork is not the only way to assess a student's growth in the art room. So what I've been doing with the artistic process of checklist has really made a difference. I had a student who met the goals of the lesson. I could see while I was observing with my checklist, and she met the goals of the lesson, but we had 15, 20 minutes left. She kept going. And her artwork, the end result, it really didn't show what the goals of the lesson were, but I knew they were there, and I knew she was just so excited about using the tools that she just kept experimenting. And that was right on there with the studio habits. I mean, she was trying new stuff and taking risks. And I don't know if other art teachers feel this way, but I am the only elementary art teacher in my district. So any growth or learning I do has been on me. It's been, you know, what book do I want to read? What do I want to get involved in? So the Maine Arts Assessment Initiative was brilliant. Just being in the room with 35 other visual and performing arts teachers was a powerful experience. And then to know that it's continuing, that we meet up periodically and I get to learn new stuff and share some of the stuff that's been successful in here. I love that it's ongoing. It's not just something that, okay, I've done this, I'm done. It's like, I'm trying this and it's working out really well, and we'll meet again, and I get to see other teachers' workshops and I get to try some of the stuff they're doing. So it's a constant cycle of growth, which is great.
Blue. Red.
We're doing curriculum mapping, but we're listing the critical skills and linking it to the standard and repeating it repeatedly to the students during the class time, so they become more familiar with the terminology embedded in the standard. And then we have to transition from that to create a rubric, some kind of record that says that they met the standard, they didn't meet the standard, and we need more time to do that.
I like getting messy. I like painting. Because you get to paint and use glue sponges and the teacher.